Nightmare Alley was directed by Guillermo Del Toro and stars Bradley Cooper, Cate Blanchett, Rooney Mara, and Toni Collette, and is the story of Stan Carlisle, a man who joins a carnival many years ago and essentially tries to make his way up in the world by learning the tricks of the trade and eventually trying to use those tricks in a way that may or may not prove that something is real. However, as his venture starts to expand, it starts to become clearer that there are things that he's doing that are definitely not real, and people want them to be real. And that could result in some serious consequences for the people who are coming to him, as well as himself. Much like other reviews that I've done in the past, I'm going to talk non-spoilers first in case you haven't seen the movie, because I'm assuming a lot of people have not. But after the grade, I'm going to talk some spoilers, so if you are interested in that particular part of the video, you can just go straight there if you'd like. But before that, let's talk about, well, briefly, this movie itself, which, like I said, I'm assuming a lot of people have not seen because this bombed pretty badly. On a $16 million budget, this made only $15 million, mostly because Spider-Man came out on the same day. Yeah, you could chalk it up to other things too, like the spread of the Omicron variant or stuff like that, but really, it was Spider-Man that took over every screen, and in fact, that's one of the reasons I couldn't even see it. And in a lot of places, it didn't even get a proper release. So it's getting a delayed release now in some other countries. And so because of that, this film really didn't have much of a head start. I'm hoping that it gets more love on home media though, especially with it now streaming on Hulu and HBO Max, because there's this weird streaming deal going on. So if you have either of the two services, you can watch the movie on that now. Nightmare Alley is a fascinating movie. Throughout the 2-hour and 30-minute runtime, I can't think of a single moment where I wanted to look away from the screen. It's an entrancing, fascinatingly directed movie, and Del Toro once again just showcases why he's one of the most innovative and one of the most charismatic directors working these days. There's a particular style to his filmmaking that is very hard to match, and there's something very personal about it. Like every time you see him make something, it feels like there's a distinct style here and a way that it's being told that only one person can tell. And that's well present throughout the entirety of this movie. And it also comes down to the visuals. The production design is absolutely immaculate. There are some sets that are just wonderfully crafted. There's some excellent cinematography on display. This is a gorgeous looking movie and filled with some excellent performances. Bradley Cooper is doing some of the best stuff I've ever seen him do in a movie over here. He's fantastic in it throughout. Cate Blanchett also is excellent in the movie. So does Rooney Mara. She is excellent as well. And Toni Collette's great too. Really, everybody in the film's great. And for the few scenes that they have, Richard Jenkins and Willem Dafoe also really crushed it. Really, this movie has a lot of great acting beats from them. I also really like David Strathairn in this movie. I hope I got that right. He's fantastic in it too, in the few scenes that he has. There's a lot of cameos like that in this movie. Lots of actors who show up and they're only there for a few scenes, but it's really cool just seeing them at that time. The musical score by Nathan Johnson is also wonderful, once again adding to the very noir vibes of this movie, which I'm going to talk more about in a second. But more than that, I go back to Del Toro's directional style. It's still got those weird quirks and definite strangeness to the entire thing. It feels like this movie, which, like I said, is a remake at the beginning of the video, still feels like it's something that's right in his wheelhouse. There's something just about it that has its own voice. And that eventually comes down to just the fact that a director can have that much command in how he's making a film. There were a few scenes where I felt like they were written in there just to tell you what's going on. Like there were moments where once you were approaching some other moments of the film towards the ending, I thought, okay, well, this moment right here feels like it's really foreshadowing something. And then you'll get another scene which does something and you're like, it feels like it's doing something else. And then there's a few more scenes like that which seem to be geared specifically towards taking you towards that point, to the point that when you finally got to some moments in the third act, it was like, well, yeah, you set this up from like the beginning. But let's talk about those noir vibes for a moment, shall we? Because this movie has quite a bit of those, especially when you compare it to 1940s and 50s cinema. And there's definitely a lot of that captured within this. Now, That's to be expected, of course, but that also means that this film is a slow burn. It takes a long time to reach any kind of resolution in terms of plot or even character. There's one thing in particular that doesn't have a payoff until almost the very end of the movie. But it takes a while to get there, and so I can see some people maybe getting turned off by that. If you're expecting something a lot more fast paced, then you're not gonna get that exactly. But if you give it the time, if you are able to give it a moment and just let it play out accordingly, when it finally gets to those big moments, those bigger reveals and stuff like that, it's really, really awesome. And I really like films like that. Like, I've talked about this on the channel many, many times, but other reviews that I've done before, you can clearly tell that there is a vibe to them there. I like the way things build sometimes. However, countering that at the same time, there were moments where I did feel like it still dragged. Like, there were some moments that I thought were a little too drawn out, and well, maybe we didn't quite need to do that, or we could have had an edit over here, for instance. Like, there were a few scenes here or there, and I thought that could have used some trimming. But really, when I think about it, that's really my only major flaw with the entire film. But nonetheless, I still love Nightmare Alley quite a bit, and I highly recommend checking it out if you get the chance to. And I'm gonna give it a 9 out of 10. So that's the non-spoiler part of it. So let's quickly talk about a few spoilers, a few things that I wanted to discuss. Really, let's talk about those foreshadowing moments. So the movie starts off, you see Stan enter this carnival space. He sees a geek. He sees a guy who's in a pit, who's being basically fed chickens and stuff like that. And he's essentially living like an animal 24/7, and they're treating him like one. He's haggard, he's got a beard, this is not what I want. He seems drugged up all the time. And eventually he becomes this sort of wasted individual. Willem Dafoe, who's running the carnival, talks about it, and he essentially says how he managed to get this person into the entire racket in the first place, like saying, hey, it's a temporary job, we'll only have you on as the, before the next one comes in. And then that just goes on for a while until you just completely get, rid of this guy, and then, of course, a new one comes in. But then that could mean anything. That could mean terminal illness or something like that could happen. There's a point where David Strahan's character talks about what happens if you use the trade too much, to the point where you start telling spook stories that people believe in way more than they should, and what that could result in. Yes, all of those things are in the ending. That's all that happens. It leads down those exact same moments, and then eventually when you get to the ending, you see exactly that. Stan ends up completely homeless, penniless, he has nothing to his name, and eventually the final trick that he pulls on Richard Jenkins' character, it eventually ends up backfiring. He's on the lam, his wife, Rooney Mara, has left him, and now he's haggard, bearded up, and he goes to a carnival space, and basically he's told, hey, we might have a job for you. I mean, we don't at the, you can't do the same tricks of the trade, but, it's a temporary assignment. And, until we get a new geek. And it ends on this very haunting shot where it's basically him accepting his fate and all that stuff. Yeah, I just feel like that could have been a little more subtle. Like, it just sort of gives it away, like, pretty early on, like, this is what's going to happen. Okay, I totally understand that. Maybe I'm being a little too overly nitpicky about it myself. But yeah, overall, it didn't affect the movie for me, really. But yeah, it's very simple to understand exactly where it led to. And of course, there's the whole aspect of how Cate Blanchett's character essentially played him the whole time and was like, hey, I'm on to you because you were on to me the first time, but, your tricks backfired, and essentially makes his entire career implode, which I thought was also really cleverly done. Like, it was a nice third act twist. I hope that whoever watched this part of the video was watching it after seeing the movie, because otherwise that's a problem. But yeah, that's about it. Guys, thank you very much for watching. Look forward to more reviews very soon. As always, if you like this, please do subscribe, and I'll see you guys at the movies.